Okay, I'm going to call to order the November 16th, 2017 Board of Supervisors meeting. Please stand for the pledge. Mr. Crowley, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And can I have a moment of silence, please, for those serving our country both at home and abroad? Thank you. Hey, we have a pretty full agenda tonight, so we'll try to keep things moving along. First up is announcements. Ms. Frescatore.
Good evening, fellow supervisors and residents. Have announcements on behalf of our Parks and Rec Department. We have a variety of discount tickets. A limited number of discount amusement park and area attraction tickets are still available for sale in the office. Price is listed online. Discount premier movie tickets, Regal, Edwards, United Artists, $9.50 each. That's quite a bargain. All tickets are sold Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. For more information and prices, check the website, www.warminstertownship.org. Park and Rec held our annual Touch a Truck event on Saturday, October 28th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Warminster Community Park. Over 2,300 people visited the event, our largest crowd ever. A special thanks goes out to the Parks and Public Work employees, emergency services, local and county, Warminster Municipal Authority, Frank Environmental, Centennial School District, and our sponsors, J.P. Mascaro and the Southampton Warminster Area Lions Club. In addition, the event hosted the debut of Public Works Paint the Plow event, where the plow painted by Archbishop Wood students received the most votes of both the judges and fans. The sale of 2018 dog licenses will be available in early December. Licenses may be purchased at the Parks and Rec office. Parks Department continues to take new applications and renewals for the Bark Park. The next Bark Park Safety Education class will be held on Monday, December 4th at 6:30. Call to register. For more information on any of these items, you may call Parks and Rec or visit the website. Last but not least, we have 2 tickets left for Radio City trip on Saturday, November 18th. 2 tickets left at quite a bargain. $110 for a resident, $115 for non-residents. Please call the office at 215-443-5428. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frescatore. Mr. Monroe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually going to steal a couple of announcements from our local beat writer, Warminster Live. There is a William Tennant breakfast with Santa. This says Future Business Leaders of America invites families to the 20th annual Breakfast with Santa fundraiser. The breakfast will be held December 2nd from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Tickets cost $6 for adults, $10 per child. It seems like that would be the opposite. With proceeds benefiting Alzheimer's Association. Let me double check that. So December 2nd, 2017. And the snow date is Saturday, December 9th. I don't think we'll be getting snow. And that's 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. The other announcement.
Where is that event? Santa?
It should be William Tennant.
Okay.
William Tennant High School. The other announcement is. I lost it, so I'm going to go ahead and pass it. So that's all that I have right now.
Thank you, Mr. Monroe. Mr. McPhillips.
Thank you. As always, I want to remind Township residents that you can safely dispose of any unwanted or any unused prescription medications over at the Warminster Police Station. And also, as I told my fellow board members earlier, I'll be leaving after our budget discussion, and I say that because I won't be here for supervisor comment. So I want to take the time now to congratulate Mr. McKee and all the winners of the past election cycle. Mark, your win clearly signals to me that the people of Warminster were happy what you've done for the last 6 years, whether it was leading this board, stormwater management, and paving roads. And congratulations.
Thank you.
You did.
Thank you.
So,
Mr. Crowley.
I yield a small portion of my time to the gentleman from Irma Lane.
Thank you, sir. The other announcement, also William Tennant, November 17th and 18th. It is the William Tennant proudly presents the 12th night It's a show, starts at 7 p.m., November 17th and 18th. Tickets are sold at the door, $10 for adults, $5 for students and senior citizens. And again, that's in the William Tennant Auditorium, 333 Centennial Road, Warminster. So that is all that I have. Thank you, Mr. Crowley.
Mr. Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congrats, Mr. Chair,
Thank
on
you.
your reelection. Well deserved. We just want to really quickly welcome new businesses to town. We had a couple get their permits issued here in the last couple of weeks. First is the Grand Buffet. It's a Chinese restaurant at 646 York Road. That's the Warminster Plaza. AAA and O, it says, I hope that's the right word, AAA and O Learning Academy, which is a daycare, summer camp, kindergarten at 299 Jacksonville Road. The Modern Family Table is a catering kitchen and restaurant at 259 County Line Road. Aviso Financial is financial services located at 626 Jacksonville Road, Suite 102. Forever Freedom Massage Therapies at 605 Lewis Drive, Suite 503. Orbit Advanced Technologies, which is antenna measurement systems integration. Sounds impressive, not sure what it means. 650 Lewis Drive, Suite 100. The Padcaster, which is a warehouse office complex at 352 Nina Way. And lastly, the Black and Tan Tattoo and Body Piercing Salon, now located at 220 West Street Road. We welcome all these businesses to town, wish them all the best, and thank them for choosing Warminster. Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crowley. Yeah, I do want to start off by thanking the residents of Warminster for having the confidence in me to represent them for another term, and it truly is an honor and a thrill. And I want to thank Anna Peak as well, who ran a great campaign. It was nice and clean. There was no mudslinging, and I think that's the way all campaigns should be run. I have a couple brief announcements that we had a brief executive session prior to tonight's meeting to discuss personnel and union and contract negotiation matters. The Warminster Rotary Club had our annual charity ball last week, and I announced it because I have the pleasure of emceeing that event every year. And, you know, I wear a lot of hats, father, husband, township supervisor, but the one that I'm most proud of is Warminster Rotarian. I mean, the family that we raised money for this year was really, really up against it and really needed it. And that's why we do it year-round. Anyone out there that wants to get involved in a Rotary Club, please look them up. Please do get involved. It's a local organization that raises money for local folks. And the only other announcement that I had, and he's not here tonight to take the honor, that Chief Donnelly is turning 50. So we want to congratulate the chief on the big 5-0. There's pictures circulating of him back when he had hair. I don't know if it was a superimposed or what, but maybe we can get that up on the generator at some point. But that's all I had for announcements, so I'm going to move on now to public comment. And township residents have an opportunity at this time to comment on any non-agenda items, subject to a 5-minute guideline as recognized by the chair. But I think we have someone that would like to speak first.
Well,
Go ahead,
yeah,
Jason.
well, I'd like to invite up, if he's willing, Mr. Ray Ruth from the Greater Bucksmouth Chamber of Commerce. You just come up for a second. Mr. Ruth owns Ray Ruth and Associates Insurance Agency. He's also involved with the Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Ruth came today because the signals got crossed. He did not get all the information. We have a presentation planned for December, and I feel badly that you came out on a cold night, and I wanted to first thank you for coming out. And I also wanted to give you an opportunity, if you would, just tell us, we're going to do an unofficial business spotlight right now on the Chamber and Ray Ruth Insurance Services. So if you could just tell us a little bit about kind of what's going on right now.
Well, the Chamber's been very active in the community. We have over 200 businesses that are part of the Chamber, and we're growing quickly. We have our next meeting December 5th. It's going to be our holiday luncheon, and we're collecting food for the food pantry, for the local food pantry. Anyone's welcome to come out and find out what the Chamber's all about. But the Chamber's all about businesses helping businesses.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And they do a lot of great stuff. There's scholarship opportunities. I know Mr. McPhillips sits on the board of the Chamber. And you're going to see them more in the coming months as we start to turn our spotlight on local businesses. And I hope Mr. Ruth will come back out in December and we'll make sure you get the right information this time. So mea culpa. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
Is there any other, thank you, Ray, by the way, you guys have good lunches, too.
That's right.
Is there any other public comment? Sure, please, come up.
Yeah, Joe Meditz, 997 Roberts Road. I've been trying to get some information on that new site being built across the street at Longstreth. In reference to this stone wall, the loose stone wall that is built across there, I've been talking with Amanda, and I was trying to get some information. Is that permanent, or is that just temporary? The reason why I'm saying is, we've had tremendous problems over the years with stones being thrown from that property over. I've lost the windshield in my car, found a rock laying on the hood, and I have found dents in the car from rocks. Something, you know, if this is permanent, I'm asking you guys, look into something here to help us out.
We'd be glad to.
I don't know if it's permanent or temporary. I'm still trying to get help.
Near the basin, the riprap? they
Yeah,
call
the
it?
one as you would be faced the property on the lower right
Yeah, I think you
side.
asked Amanda, we looked into that, and that's permanent. That's designed per local ordinance, state ordinance, the conservation district. Now, there are other options, concrete, they call them checker blocks where grass grow through them. They have options for that as long as it meets certain standards per the state, the county, and the township. So it's not something we drive. They have options, but they pick that option. That's usually what the contractors do, is do the riprap. It's
They're
not
not
on the, it's not in the right of way. It's not, I mean, I can go out and look at it myself, but the last pictures I saw, the last information when you contacted the township, everything looked okay. Now, I don't know if it's aesthetics or what. The retaining wall you also mentioned, that's in the back part of the basin. I mean, that's
Yeah, that's
permanent.
beautiful. But the one facing us on the street is this pile of rocks. I feel like I'm living in a quarry.
That's the emergency spillway where if that fills up, that's where the water would go over top. Now, that's a standard a construction material. We can contact the contractor or the developer and ask, but
I
it
think we
doesn't meet.
should.
And that's up to, to the township.
It's not
decide.
just
We
a
can-
small pile. I mean, it's just a couple hundred
No,
feet long.
I saw, yeah.
You know,
Can-
and
can
like
we
I said,
contact
That's
the
not
developer at
temporary.
this stage, and can we contact the developer at this stage? I mean,
We can ask. I mean, the other option is going to be concrete. And
well, the thing is, they brought grass all the way around up to both
Right.
sides of the rocks,
That's
and then
the-
they've stopped.
that's the.
You know, we thought they were going to cover it, or that was just temporary.
No, that's the berm that keeps the water in, and then if everything gets clogged or for emergency purposes, that's where the water will go out through the riprap. So you need to have rock line. If it was just grass, the berm would be jeopardized. It would erode the soil, holding back the rest of the water. So
Is there a way to make it look better?
right.
Than of like,
I think that's what, I mean.
That's all
aesthetics,
you're
we
looking
can- we-
for, correct?
We can reach out
Well, I'm
and ask.
concerned about aesthetics and also kids over there. I mean, you know, we're still having problems in the neighborhood. It never went away, but we're still having problems with kids throwing stuff from over there. And even while construction's going on, we've had problems. I've called the police I don't know how many times. It's been so many times, I just stopped calling anymore. I just try to go after the kids myself, but one of these days I'm going to get hurt. So I stopped. But, you know, it's the problem is the rocks. It's, you know, like I said, I lost the windshield. I found the rock laying on the hood of my car. We've got dents in our cars from the kids throwing stuff. I've had my house egged from kids. It's dark over there. They hide in the ditches and what have you. You know,
They're throwing them from that new rock that was put in? They're pretty big. I mean,
no, I
they're
won't
not
say
ones
it's
you
from
chuck.
that big rocks. No, I won't say it's from that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
they're
can
pretty
be.
big.
Yeah,
But
they're-
that still scares me. And it's ugly looking. I'll be honest with you. It's ugly looking.
At the township,
You look out
it's
the
okay
front
with-
window and you see this big thing. It looks like you're in a quarry.
Amanda contacted me right away. We looked into it. I wanted to make sure it wasn't temporary. It wasn't. That's per the design, per the standards. I have no problem with working with Amanda to try to ask the contractor developer, but we'll take that first step. It sounds like it's aesthetics. There are other options. I did look it up. It's concrete or certain type of concrete or plastic you fill in, but it has to also meet county requirements, not just township requirements.
I understand that.
Yeah,
Right,
and
I
also
understand
DEP.
that.
So I have no problem taking the first step, and then usually I get the answers no, but I'll work through Amanda and the staff to see how it goes.
Yeah, I'd appreciate if somebody would look into something there.
You're welcome.
The other thing is I turned in a couple of videos some time back about the flooding on that street.
We looked at that as well.
Any thoughts on that?
That was before the development, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. That's coming from above or upstream, upslope of the actual property that was developed. I do agree, there's a lot of water. We looked at that several times, actually. That's more of a long-term, I think you should provide as much information you can about where that's coming. That's not coming from that development. I mean, that's not,
No, it used to
Not at
run
all.
down the driveways from the Longstress School, but
Yeah, but
everything from York Road and all the side streets all empty into Marion and Robert right there at that point.
Yeah, that would be one where we would put on more long-term to look at.
Water projects.
So the basin that they're doing now, that wouldn't help?
Actually,
Okay.
will help.
It will help.
But most of that water, that was a lot of water.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
surprised
kids
that
had
they
boats
never
out
made.
there, there was cars on the water, it was bad. That video was pretty good.
Yeah, I would recommend that be separate from this project, but that's
Yeah.
something that, and the township staff is aware of it, and I did look at that several times, so.
Okay,
I can't do anything with this project to help fix any of that, but just the stormwater facilities being put in. I also look where they're discharging that below where that flooding was occurring, so I did look into that a little bit as well. But that would be more of a township project at that point, so.
okay.
And I do agree, it was some serious flooding.
Right now, I'm more concerned about that stone wall. It's not a fancy finished wall, it's just like
Just
rocks dumping
Work
on there.
through Amanda, and I'll communicate what I can come up with, and we'll see how we progress.
Okay,
All right?
appreciate the help.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Is there any other public comment tonight on the first round? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to the consent agenda. Mr. Schuster?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight's consent agenda is as follows. Item A is approval of the minutes from your October 19th, 2017 meeting. Item B, your minutes from the November 2nd, 2017 budget workshop. Item C is approval for Gilmore to proceed with the grant survey for the Warminster Community Park in relation to the RACP grant, and get a cost and scope proposal for the PennDOT permit. That would be topography and survey for design and permitting not to exceed $10,500, and an HOP and PennDOT approval for Bristol/Hatboro Roads traffic signal permit plan not to exceed $26,530. Item D is release number 10 from the escrow account for Hart School redevelopment as in the amount of $144,063 as recommended by the engineer. Item E is Giuseppe's parking lot expansion, release number 1 final from escrow in the amount of $87,394 as recommended by the engineer. Item F, Warminster Plaza, 606 York Road, release number 10 from the escrow account in the amount of $286,998 as recommended by the engineer. Item G, 222 Norristown Road, release number 7 from the escrow account in the amount of $46,266 as recommended by the engineer. Item H, station at Bucks County East, release number 3 final from escrow in the amount of $102,688 as recommended by the engineer. Item I is SEPTA parking lot expansion, release number 3 final from escrow in the amount of $85,122 as recommended by the engineer. Item J, Jacksonville Plaza, release number 3 final from escrow for $12,807 as recommended by the engineer. Item K is Giamo Realty, the legal and engineering escrow, final release, the amount of $6,302 plus any accrued interest. Item L is approval of change order number 1 for the library HVAC project. This is replacement of baseboard heaters, which was not considered in the original proposal. That's for $10,000, and I believe 50% of that is grant funded. And item M is a separation agreement with Margaret Linder as discussed in executive session.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Motion.
Mr. Monroe, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. McPhillips, any discussion on the board? Any from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next up is the treasurer's report. Mr. Monroe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight we have September transfers and October transfers. In addition to that, we have supplemental bill list dated October 27th, 2017 in the amount of $1,535,610.67, as well as a bill list dated November 16th, 2017 in the amount of $866,176.86. And that is all that I have.
That is a motion.
Motion?
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Crowley, any discussion on the treasurer's report? Any from the public? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next up is the September financial statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The October financial statement is
Oh, I'm sorry.
unfortunate. No, it is, you are correct, it's September. That's what it's on the agenda, that's what it's supposed to be. I just wanted to make note that usually we would give the previous month, but we're still running a little behind due to the implementation of the new system. That should be corrected for December, as I related to you, in an email. So go, in December, we should have November's report and be back on track. But as soon as we have the October report, I'll send it out to you. September report, nothing major to highlight. We are still on track for most of our budget items. Our revenues are coming in above budget, expenditures under budget. But I do caution that we do have some significant fourth quarter payments, specifically our pension contribution, that will have the expenditures catch up to where the revenues are. So again, nothing of concern I have for the September financials, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anyone have anything for Mr. Schuster on that? No? Okay, I'm going to move on to unfinished business. Item A, adoption of solicitation ordinance 741. Mr. Savona?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the board discussed this in October and authorized advertisement. This ordinance, if approved, would separate out the licensing of transient retail businesses and the licensing of door-to-door solicitation permits to two separate licenses. Under the current code, they're kind of mixed in together, and this ordinance would clarify what regulations apply strictly to transient retail businesses such as Christmas tree vendors and vendors who set up for less than a full year, and would create a new set of regulations for the licensing of door-to-door solicitation. It's been advertised and is appropriate for adoption. If the board's inclined, a motion would be in order to adopt ordinance 741.
Okay, is there a motion?
Motion.
Mr. Monroe, is there a second? Second. Mr. McPhillips, any discussion on the motion?
The only thing I would say is that I think it's important to kind of reiterate what solicitors are supposed to have. I mean, I still get them at my door. Oftentimes they'll say, "Oh no, I do have an ID," and they'll show me their Verizon ID or whatever. And they are supposed to have a township, and correct me if I'm wrong, a township issued ID on their person, identifying the company and things of that nature. Correct?
Want to-
Under the new ordinance, yes.
Yeah, under the new ordinance. That's part of the problem. Under the current ordinance, it's not exactly clear. So this new ordinance will adopt a procedure that applies strictly to the licensing of door-to-door solicitors. Obviously, doesn't apply to things that would be exempt or covered by the First Amendment, charitable or political solicitation. But each individual who's going to do door-to-door sales or door-to-door solicitation will have to obtain a permit from the township issued by the police department that identifies them. It also requires certain forms of ID, criminal history reports be provided to the police before the permit's issued. It sets rules in terms of when the solicitation can occur, and it allows for township residents to obtain a no solicitation sign from the township. So if you want to be excluded from those things, you can sign up at the township office, get a sign, they'll put you on a list, and then we can create a do not solicit list, so that when someone obtains a permit, they know that those addresses are not to be solicited. So that format will be clearly established and part of the township code if the ordinance is approved.
Thank you.
Any other discussion from the board? Any from the public? I see none. I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion carries. It's a nice improvement to that ordinance. Item B, award debt insurance RFP, and I think there's a representative here from PFM. Yep.
Zach.
Zach?
Hi, everyone. So we're going to walk through the green handout.
Tell us who you are first.
Zach Williard from PFM, we're your independent financial advisor. So, just to take a step back, last month you heard from Jamie Schlesinger, he was here. The township authorized the financing team to move forward with a competitive RFP process to solicit bids from local banks for a $7 million drawdown line of credit. That would be for two projects you have going on right now, Shenandoah Woods and the park projects, okay? So we're gonna walk through the responses tonight, and then Michael has an ordinance, should you want to approve the best bid, we can go forward with this. Settlement's scheduled to be right before the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, it's going to be approved
Okay.
by ordinance, yes.
So on page 1, you can see the interest rate chart we always like to show you. I think every time we're in front of you, we tell you rates are at historic lows. Believe it or not, they're at historic lows again. Not at the lowest point ever. But again, we got a real good bid, which we'll show you in a second. And that's due to the fact that the market is very good for borrowing right now. Okay, so that's good news. Page 2 is the timeline that we've been following. Again, we've been talking about this since the summertime. But again, tonight you can approve this debt ordinance, lock in the interest rates, and then your solicitor will usher this to settlement, right now scheduled for December 20th, at which time you'll be able to draw down the first portion of the money needed for the project. Again, this was scheduled and designed as a drawdown because you're not going to spend all the money at once. So this way you can draw it over a 24-month period, which will help save the township on interest expense. On page 3, we have the summary of the bank bids. Now, when we bid this out, we did both a 15-year amortization and a 20-year amortization, meaning the loan would be 15 years long or 20 years long. So in total, we got 6 different banks to bid. They provided over 20 different options, okay? Now, we ended up deciding, after talking with the administration, that we're going to go with the 20-year amortization. I'll let Greg maybe give us a briefing on that real quick.
Yeah, just a little background. The RACP program, we've been informed that they are okay with a 20-year period, but not necessarily okay with a 15-year unless they review it and give permission. We've reached out to them. We have not heard back. I believe if we went for a 15-year, we'd be okay, but I don't know. And I would hate for the board to go ahead and accept this only to see it not be applied to any of the activity regarding revolving around the RACP grant. So that's why I would recommend moving forward with the 20. Also, from a cash flow perspective, it does spread out the payments a little bit more and make it a little bit more easier on the budget.
And this is designed to be prepayable at any time without penalty, so you do have the ability to pay it down early if you choose to. So on page 3, we have the bids. FMB Newtown Bank came in with very aggressive bidding, okay? So if you look at the top of the page there, we took a few of their options. Now, a lot of banks don't offer fixed rates for the life, okay, over 20 years. That's a long fixed rate. They actually did offer that. But they also offered a 5-year fixed rate, a 7-year fixed rate, and a 10-year fixed rate. All 3 of those options come with a max cap rate, which is the real key to this. Okay, so that meaning that no matter where interest rates are after a 5 or 7-year period, you'll never go above a 4.5%. Okay, so we're going to take these options and now translate them into dollars, which is what you care about. So if you flip to the next page,
Excuse me, may I just ask, what would be the rate for the 20-year, because it's not listed on there?
it's a 3.2% for the full term.
I understand, I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we ran our models and we picked the top 3 best options. Okay, so on page 4, in option 1 in the gray there, if you pick the fixed rate for the life, so fixed for 20 years, okay, if you scroll down to the very bottom in column 7, you can see the debt service would be about $517,000 over the 20-year period annually. Okay, now this assumes you draw all $7 million of it, which I don't think you're going to need the full $7 million, all the settlement, and it also assumes that this resets, or that this is at the cap rate of the the fixed rate of a 3.2%. So $517,000. Now, if we look in option 2, let's look in just the orange. Okay, this is assuming the 7-year fixed rate, okay, of a 2.15%, and then it resets at the maximum cap rate of a 4.50. In column 9, you can see the debt service is about the same, okay, about $517,000. Now, over on the far right, option 3 in the blue, this assumes a 10-year fixed rate, okay, at a 2.5%. And then after that 10-year fixed rate, it'll reset. We assume the worst case scenario, again, of 4.5%. And if you look in column 11, you can see that's around $509,000. So if you go through these 3 different options, it actually doesn't make sense to take the fixed rate for the term. You're actually better off taking the lower fixed rate for 10 years. And then you have some upside potential, okay, depending on where interest rates are in the future, but the worst case scenario, will still be better than if you took the 320 fixed for the life. Okay, so the ordinance tonight is designed to accept the proposal for the 10-year fixed rate option, being as the dollars and cents of it, that was the cheapest cost proposal. Okay, so let's pause here. I think this is the main page. Happy to answer questions about this. This is a very good bid. Okay.
Any questions so far from the board? I've been entertaining from the public as well. If there's any questions or comments from the public at this point,
I
free.
really, I think you're doing a phenomenal job. You did with the presentation for our workshop that we had, and also with this, made it very simple for residents and for the supervisors to understand, you know, what's behind the scene and what's best for the township. So just want to thank you, because it's very easy to, so you're saying the 10-year is what we were going to go with. I thought, Greg, you said something about 20 years. So I'm a
Okay,
little confused.
so this is a 20-year term, but the rate is fixed for the first 10 years. Then it is, what's the rate after that?
It resets
Resets
to 75%
of prime, with a cap of 4.5. So I'm jumping if I'm incorrect. The numbers you are seeing here is really the worst-case scenario.
Okay.
This is if we draw down all the funds, if we don't receive a dime come in for any kind of grant, and the 4.5 cap comes into play. This is the worst-case scenario. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct, yes.
But it is over 20 years. However, as these grants come in, we can pay this off early with no penalty, and get the debt off our books as quickly as we can. But it is designed to be 20 years, but fixed rate for 10, variable thereafter, with a cap at 4.5%.
Okay.
Yeah.
You answered all my questions.
These
Thank
are
you.
funding, well, some of this is funding park projects that we will be reimbursed from the state and the county.
So, this is both for Warminster Community Parks and Shenandoah Woods. For Warminster Community Parks, a number of our grants are being received on the back end of the project. So this is for cash flow purposes. We simply don't have all the money to lay out for these projects. Obviously, as soon as we get those grants in, we will go ahead and pay down this debt.
Right.
A little bit different for Shenandoah Woods. Shenandoah Woods, there's a number of things that are planned that are just strictly cost. There are grants out there, and we are going after those grants, or will go after those grants, but we're not counting on them in these calculations.
Okay.
And just to put it in the simplest terms, and I appreciate you both hitting on it, but just to say it again, we're getting a $7 million loan. We're not planning on spending $7 million. And the money that we do spend, a portion of that, or a decent portion of that, we're going to be getting back in grants. So,
Correct.
is that fair?
I think when you net it all out, and don't quote me on this, but I think you're looking at between 3.5 and 4.5 million that we'll actually spend. Most of that on Shenandoah Woods if we move forward with some of the additional projects above and beyond the acquisition. But you're correct. Although it's a $7 million loan, the net would not be $7 million. It would be lower than that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
And I would phrase it as it's up to 7 million. Again, you don't have to draw it all if you choose
Right.
not to.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Quick question on, so the 10-year FNB Newtown, the drawdown, we can draw money out at any time during the life of the loan?
Good question. So the way this is designed is a draw period for up to 24 months.
Okay.
Once we hit that 24-month period, you can either, take out the last straw or, cancel it.
That's it, up to 24 months, and that's it?
Correct.
Okay,
It's not open-ended. Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
There is one other stipulation I just want to make sure everyone is aware of. One of the considerations that First National Bank did put in here is that we need to keep our main account with them. That's where it currently is, so they require us to keep that account there as long as we have drawn down on this loan. As soon as we pay off the loan, we are free from that obligation. Discuss this with the finance director. We have no issue with this, but I just want to let you know that it is locking us into this bank for our general fund during the life of the loan.
And because we do have we do our business there at that bank, and we're also taking that loan out, are they going to be automatically taking the money out of the loan? Because I know, like with a home equity loan that I have, the bank automatically takes it out of my account.
It would most likely, they wouldn't automatically do it. It would be an internal transfer probably from one account to another.
Okay.
But they're, unless we actually set up a fixed plan like that, which I can't imagine us doing, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, you go first.
Are there any negatives being, attached to the one bank? I mean, like, if they decide to start raising fees or things of that nature, I mean, we're protected contractually to a certain degree with
We
them?
have agreements with them, and, the fees are really not that substantial, they're very minor, and quite frankly, the interest rate you get at any bank is pretty minimal at this point, so we just didn't see a downside to it.
Okay.
As a general, not rule, but I mean, do all of them sort of come with a specified drawdown period?
Well, we asked for that.
Yeah.
So typically, the banks don't prefer to have a drawdown period because
Right.
there's a level of uncertainty for them.
Mhm.
So when we issued the RFP, we asked that they provide that.
Okay.
Some banks were not able to respond because of that. Other banks wanted to do a shorter draw
Right.
period, but
I see that, well, like Pinnacle Public Finance did not offer a drawdown facility. The only reason I ask is as we're considering it, and this is very easy to understand, you're making complex things simple for non-banking people, so I appreciate it, is that with the 24-month clock, which would start, I guess, January,
When the loans,
when
yeah.
the loan funds,
yep.
is that at that point, within that 24-month period, we would have to decide, we'd have to make decisions about how we're using the funds in
Right.
terms of Shenandoah Woods while we're navigating some other things.
That is correct.
Just knowing that we have, something we want to make sure that we're aware of, that we're on a clock, that we can't just, hey, we want to put off doing this because we want to make sure that the money's here for that. This is tying us to January 2020. We got to,
Well, you have to have the money drawn. You don't necessarily have to have spent the money. at that
right.
But
Okay, all right, I
just-
see the difference, okay. Thank you.
But also, if you're uncertain about if and when you're gonna spend the money,
Yeah.
it might not be feasible to, or recommended, just pull out that money and let it sit in our account while we're paying interest on
Right.
it. There's always retain the option, and jump in, Zach, if you have any comment on this. We could always, don't necessarily want to do this again, but if there's a material change 2 years from now,
Right.
and we need to reexamine things, well, we can simply close out what we've been done here and then move on and do
Fair
it
enough.
again. We would, of course, have to go through the same process and eat the same amount of costs, but that sure beats taking out a few $1 million that we don't know what we're gonna do.
Okay, yeah.
So we're not ever locked onto a single road. We do have options.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, part of the spirit of this was to do this now to lock in interest rates today,
Yes.
since we know they're low, but to buy you all some time as you work through how you're gonna spend this money and how the grants are gonna come in and how all
Right,
that's gonna
right.
play out.
Right,
I like the fact that the rates being so low, it's optimum time for us to go ahead and borrow it. But also, we're going to be heading into troubled waters with our pension fund coming up. But we have 2 years, to make up our minds exactly what we want to do. So I think that gives us a nice period of time to think it over. And like you said, if it goes past that time, then we just start the process over again.
Yeah, you always retain that option.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay? Good questions. Anything else?
Anyone from the public have a question? Sure, come on up, please.
Anita Cook, Auto Lane. I have a couple questions. So you have a 2-year drawdown period. What is the collateral for the loan? Is it going to be, is there going to be a lien secured on real estate? or
No.
There's no
Just
collateral,
nothing, okay.
We pledge the full faith and credit of the township and their taxing authority.
Okay. And then we're borrowing up to $7 million, or $7 million, depending on what we draw. What is our anticipated date to actually own Shenandoah Woods?
Well, do you want to take this?
So,
soon?
as of right now, the purchase agreement has been signed by the redevelopment authority and the Navy. The agreement is right now sitting in the Secretary of Navy's office. Under the Federal Lands Disposition Act, typically, it's required to go to Congress, to one of the defense subcommittees for a 30-day oversight review, and then they would move to closing. I spoke with Greg Preston, who's the BRAC coordinator for the East Region, literally yesterday, and he informs me that what he's waiting on from the Secretary of the Navy is word that they're not going to be required to go to Congress with it, which means once they get the thumbs up from the Secretary's office, they can schedule a closing. So they were hoping to do it by the end of the year, but at this point, it's probably more likely in the first quarter of next year.
And what happened with the Aldi agreement? What are we buying them out for? Do we know?
I'm in discussions with their attorney right now.
So we don't know.
We don't have a fixed number yet, no.
So we're because like $500,000. They could demand that, right?
No,
Oh, I thought it was
it's 350.
600.
And
Oh,
they've acknowledged already that that number was based
Oh,
on
okay,
a
we
prior
don't-
valuation of over 25 million or
Right.
something. So they've agreed in principle that the number will have to be adjusted downward. It's just a question of settling on the exact number.
And then we can only draw on this money for those two projects, right? We can't do it to catch up with pension, we can't do it to, okay.
The ordinance we're going to discuss in a few minutes
Okay.
has very specific terms discussing what the money's been approved. And this will all have to be approved by the Department of Community and Economic Development. So it limits the applicability of what this money can be spent for.
And then as we draw, we're only paying interest on the part of the money that we've drawn at that time. We're not paying it on the full amount, just on the net gross.
Correct.
Okay. And what happens, I know this sounds crazy, but like months ago when we first started talking about doing the Navy, getting that property, and I said, well, there's how many oil tanks and what's it going to cost to remediate that? And nobody knew. And then I said, well, all right, to just do one house, what's it going to cost? And no one knew, and it was like, don't worry about it, it's so far in the future, it's not a problem. Well, now we're here, and it's a blighted property. Did we put a deposit on this? Did they require any good faith deposit? How much
Yes,
did we put down?
$100,000.
So I know this is in the bottom of the ninth with, 2 men on, but what would be the negative, other than losing a $100,000 deposit, of us just backing out of Shenandoah Woods, letting the Navy clean up their own mess, and then have a nice, clean property that someone else could buy?
Well, the Navy has done significant environmental remediation at Shenandoah Woods. There have been 3 different reports issued that have been approved by the EPA, the DEP, and the Department of the Navy, called Findings of Suitability to Transfer, or what they call FOST reports. Because under federal law, they're not permitted to deliver an actively contaminated site. So they've gone through environmental remediation, environmental testing, and all of the known contaminants that are recognized and require remediation have been removed. The RDA has gone through and done an independent review. There's one area of the property that has some construction debris that's still underground. It's not required under federal law, it's not a CERCLA problem, so they weren't required to remove that. We've talked to the RDA about having them do that remediation. That's one of the things the Bucks County RDA specializes in. They're not estimating that the cost for that is going to be significant. It's basically digging out the material and backfilling or putting clean fill in. The demolition is all part of what Mr. Schuster has been working on for the phase 2 sort of the project. And the RDA has come up with some preliminary numbers, but like anybody else, they're a public entity, so they would have to actually go out and solicit bids for that.
Right.
But we do have some ballpark back of the envelope guesstimates about what that would
You'd have to
cost.
assume there's asbestos in every one of those houses, wouldn't you? Would it be
That's all been
safe?
tested for.
And there's no asbestos in any of the
There is
houses?
some, but if there is, there's money available from, one of the things the RDA wants to do is go to the DEP, because there are grant programs and grant funds that are available to do that kind of remediation, and the RDA has done it in places all over the county. So some of the demolition costs, they think they can maybe pack into those grants. So it's, believe me, everything that we're doing is being done with the eye toward using as much available public funds as we can. That's why we partnered with the RDA to do that.
So we wouldn't have to pay the RDA back for those services?
We pay them back for anything they're actually out of pocket. So if they get grant funds from the state that pay for a portion of that remediation or any of those costs, we wouldn't reimburse that because they're obviously being reimbursed that money by the DEP.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else from the public have anything? If you want to continue on.
Okay. Well, I think that's it. I'll turn it over to Michael at this point.
We had 2 separate actions, award the RFP and then the ordinance.
I'm going to ask Mr. Savona to go ahead and craft a motion for
So-
item B.
So the first item on your agenda is to approve the award of the sale of the note to First National Bank of Newtown at the rate and term recommended by PFM. That would be a 10-year fixed at 2.5% and a 4.5% cap rate thereafter over a 20-year term.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Crowley, is there a second?
Second?
Ms. Frescatore, is there any further discussion from the board? Any from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion carries. I'm going to need Mr. Savona to craft a motion for item C as well.
Mr. Chairman, the next item is the approval of ordinance number 742. This is an ordinance which the board would be adopting under what we call the Local Government Unit Debt Act, or LGUDA. The Local Government Unit Debt Act is the act whereby the General Assembly has authorized local municipalities to take on debt. Unlike a business or a common citizen, we don't take mortgages, we don't sign promissory notes. Our authority to borrow is based on the authorization set forth in the LGUDA statute. That act requires that the municipality, whether we're doing a bond issue or what we call a general obligation note, which is what this is, to adopt an ordinance which approves both the terms and the purposes of the money to be taken as debt, and authorizes you to pledge your taxing ability or your full faith and credit in order to secure and to repay that debt. The ordinance has been advertised. The ordinance as advertised would provide for the purchase or the drawdown of up to $7 million in debt under the note that you would be issuing with this ordinance. The note would be sold in private sale to First National Bank of Newtown as opposed to being sold on the open market like a bond would. The purposes that are outlined in the note for the use of the funds are as follows. The land acquisition of Shenandoah Woods in the estimated amount of $1 million. Remediation and reclamation of Shenandoah Woods in the estimated amount of $2.5 million. And improvements to the Warminster Community Park in the estimated amount of $3.5 million. Again, the ordinance would authorize the note to be issued for a term not to exceed 20 years to First National Bank of Newtown. If approved, we would advertise a post-enactment notice, and the ordinance, along with the borrowing-based certificates and other documents that are required to be approved by the state, would be submitted to the Department of Community and Economic Development for their approval. If they approve and issue a certification of the debt, then we could close on the loan as indicated by Mr. Williard sometime in the latter part of December. So if the board's inclined, an ordinance would be, or a motion would be in order to adopt and approve ordinance number 742.
Is there a motion?
Motion.
Mr. Monroe, second.
Second?
Ms. Frescatore, any further discussion from the board? Any from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Great
Motion
job,
Very good.
Mr. Savoni.
Thank you, Zach and PFM. You guys are really
Thank
good
you.
company.
You guys
Thank you for your help.
You guys did a great job. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to item D, which is 2018 Board of Supervisors proposed budget. Mr. Schuster?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have all received and reviewed the proposed budget, which I presented to you at the budget workshop a couple of weeks ago. This is the time for you to consider that. You are free to move it along to a proposed budget proposed by the Board of Supervisors, which would be duly noticed, and then finally adopted at a meeting in December. You are free to make changes to that budget and then propose it. If you want to go ahead and take more time, you can do that. However, it would mean extra meetings, either in later November or early December. We'd have to work on a timeline. So we're here to support whatever your needs are and what direction you want to go. I laid out for you at the last meeting some of the challenges that we have, specifically the growing deficit that we see in 2018 and beyond, and the effect of having that deficit would be on our fund balance, how it would be depleted over the next 2 or so years, depending on the rate or size of that deficit. On the table, there is a list of options which have been put together by me and my staff. It's 3 pages stapled together. I have a motion here prepared in case you would like to move this to a proposed budget. And if you did that, I would ask that you adopt some or all of these options. Option number 1, which is the first page, is some minor changes to certain funds based on updated information that we have received. Also, an adjustment in the liquid fuels account. We are going to have less carryover than we anticipated from 2017 to 2018. We would remove a dump truck from that purchase plan and put that money in roads instead, so we'd still be able to do between 4 and 5 miles of roads. So I'd recommend, no matter what you do, to use option 1. Option number 2 is reducing expenditures, and the quickest and easiest way to do that is a $538,000 reduction of our contingency to pension line item. That is the difference between the market value method and the smoothing method on the police pension plan. So that would reduce the current year, or sorry, the 2018 expenditures significantly. However, you all know the consequences for doing that. By going back to the smoothing method, you are putting less than what you really should be into the pension fund, and of course exacerbating the current pension shortfall. Option 3 is a tax increase, and this is the hybrid model that I proposed at the budget workshop, which would have the Park and Rec millage increasing by 1.65 mils to 3.65, debt service increasing 1.9 mils up to 2.66, which is a total increase of 3.61 mils. That tax increase alone wouldn't solve the problem, but at least for debt service and for Park and Rec, we would make those funds whole, which is incredibly important because those are the funds that are going to support all the work that we've just been talking about, whether it be the purchase of Shenandoah Woods, the reclamation of the property, the building of a stormwater basin, or all the improvements over at the community park. That would come out of these two funds. So that is that option. If the board chooses not to move forward with a tax increase, based on the model that we've put together, again, we will begin to eat into fund balance. The problem that I foresee would not happen in 2018. You would draw down fund balance, but you wouldn't put yourself in peril. But the problem would begin to become readily apparent, in my belief, in 2019 and beyond. Again, it depends on the timing and how we do in expenditures, and mostly on the revenue side as well. If we have additional construction or a lot of projects which generate one-time revenue, whether it be building permit fee, zoning permit, transfer tax, those could help offset the situation as they have over the last couple of years. If the board doesn't want to do a tax increase, you should have, not necessarily tonight, but in future meetings, discussions about Shenandoah Woods. We're committed to that purchase, but we're not committed to do some of the other projects that we talked about, specifically the remediation and the stormwater basin. Those are projects which technically could be put off. I'm not recommending or saying that's the right thing, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to figure out a way to pay for it. And with the debt structure that you just approved, you don't have to draw down that whole loan. It's an option on how much you want to take. So you do have flexibility to consider as we move forward. If the board does not want to do a tax increase, I will, throughout 2018, keep you fully apprised of where our fund balance is and what the situation is, so you're fully prepared and have knowledge of where we're headed. And I'm happy to take any questions, or if you're ready to move forward with a budget, I can help you craft a motion.
I have a couple questions, Mr.
Sure.
Schuster. The second option that you had, going to the smoothing method.
Yes.
That's one of the reasons we're in the predicament that we're in, because the expectation of getting 8% back on investments was unrealistic. So what we're doing now, we're paying what we actually owe. Am I correct in saying
You're
that?
correct. The 8% assumed rate of return does exasperate the situation. However, the smoothing method versus the market value method is actually separate from that. By putting us on the smoothing method is smoothing out the losses that have been incurred year over year. So we're actually taking we're putting in less than we should. Less than we should based on the actuarial valuation.
For the market value, we're paying what we should be paying.
Market value, you're paying exactly
Right.
what we should,
Okay.
yes.
And as far as the tax increase that you're recommending, how would that translate per family household to our residents?
So it's going to vary depending on the assessment of your house, but the budget number that I believe, or the number I presented, I believe at the budget workshop, that for the average assessed home in Warminster, that would equate to a $95 a year increase. But again, everyone needs to check their individual assessment
Right.
to see how it impacts. It's going to impact everyone
Right.
differently.
Right, I know, depending on the value of your home and all that, but generally speaking, that would be a ballpark
That is
figure.
the average.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that. That's all I have.
You're welcome.
These aren't, it's not option one or option two or option three.
No,
You're
the-
asking for all three options.
Well, I'm asking, option number one is just really cleanup stuff. From every time we propose a budget, we get new information. You'll see that there's a minor change in the real estate taxes, an increase. We received an increase in the assessed value from the county, and the total impact is an increase of $368, so it doesn't really help us much. But it's just some minor cleanup along with the liquid fuels. So yeah, I would say option one you do anyways, that is cleanup items. Option number two, if you're already going to have a large deficit, you could still leave that in the budget. We wouldn't pay that until third or probably fourth quarter of next year, and if we're in dire straits, we're certainly not going to pay it. But you could always do that through a budget amendment next year. If for some reason, we win the lottery and we have tons of funds come in, you could always do a budget amendment and take care of it there. So I would say from a financial standpoint, whether it's in the budget or out of the budget, you still retain flexibility up until the later part of 2018. But I would just say for planning purposes, I would rather on the general fund have an approximate deficit of $1.6 million versus 2.1 or $2.2 million.
So go back to the smoothing.
I would do that, and if the opportunity arose that we felt we could go back to the market value, there's nothing that stops us from making that extra payment, into here and still getting the same amount of value. So I would leave it out and just not carry that as large of a deficit on the books if possible. But you're not giving up any flexibility.
Okay.
Anyone else have any? No? Anyone from the public want to weigh in? All right, I guess we're looking toward a motion here. I have a couple of things. Number one, where we were with the pension is that the pension was fully funded up until 2009. And then the previous board, none of this board, none of these people changed fund managers, and instead of riding the market back up, all the investments were switched out, and we ended up losing $5 million. That's precisely what happened, and we've reviewed that and reviewed it. That's how we got where we are with the pension. The smoothing method is just something that was offered by the state for a 3-year term, I believe, that they've extended it for situations such as ours, to make it easier on the taxpayers to bear the burden. So that is what it is, and it's going to, and I mention it every budget and every chance I get, that's something, a bill we never had before that's going to continue to grow. It's the elephant in the room that's not going to leave the room.
It's the MMO.
All right. So we're open to, is there any suggestions for budget options?
My recommendation is option one and option two.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I agree. Option one and two.
I
mean,
also agree.
Clearly have challenges, but I just can't see, I'm not at a place where I can ask to raise taxes. I'm not there. We have work to do. We need to figure this out, but I just, raising taxes on the residents of Warminster isn't an option for me.
And I respect all of your opinion. I respectfully disagree. If it were my choice, I would take option 3 because we are making a major purchase. Somehow that's going to have to be paid for. We are doing work in the park that's going to have to be maintained. And I worry that if we start eating into our fund balance, we're going to leave ourselves in a precarious position in the future. I respect my fellow board members and their opinions, but I wanted to state mine.
That's fair.
So with that, I mean, is there any comment from the public before we take any action? Because we're certainly open to it. Okay, well, I guess it seems that we're going to craft a motion here to accept options 1 and 2. Am I correct? So I'm going to ask you to craft a motion, Mr. Schuster.
So the motion would be that the Board of Supervisors propose a preliminary 2018 budget based on the Township Manager proposed budget amended to include option 1 as presented by the Township Manager to make minor changes in some funds and reduce the deficit in the Liquid Fuels Fund, and option 2 as presented by the Township Manager to reduce the pension expenditure by $538,724 by reverting to the smoothing method for the police pension.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Monroe, motion, Mr. McPhillips, second. Mr. Monroe, any further discussion? I will point out that this is preliminary. Final budget will be approved in December. So this is to advertise.
That is correct. It is a preliminary budget. You do retain some options to change it. However, they are very limited. I believe you can only increase line items by 10%. There's no restriction how much you can decrease. So if a tax increase or any major change that would increase line items really can't be considered going forward, although you can increase or you can consider further decreases. But if you did a preliminary budget tonight, there would be no need for, excuse me, an additional meeting in December above and beyond the December 21st meeting, unless you decide you want to meet in any ways and talk things over.
So there is a motion and there is a second.
Do you think we should think about this some more, since what Greg is saying, once we make this decision, that you're basically saying that's it,
Well,
correct?
yes, so you're going to lose the option unless you schedule another meeting to go ahead and increase taxes. You will pretty much lose that option. There is one other additional option. Mike's probably going to smack me now, but every 2 years after a municipal election, the incoming board, which in this case is the same as the outgoing board, retains the option to reopen the budget in January and make changes until, I believe, February 15th. So that would be the only other option that you would have post-budget adoption. Not to even confuse you further, but you could do a proposed or preliminary budget with the tax increase tonight and still retain the option of removing it on December 21st, because that you can decrease it as much as you want. There's a cap on how much you can increase it. But yes, if you voted on the motion that you just put on the floor, it would severely limit the capability, but you still retain that one option in the early part of next year.
How does everybody else feel about this?
My issue with the tax raise is that it's only a Band-Aid.
I agree.
We passed the buck on to the township residents. We're going to be back in the same boat again a year or 2 years or whatever it's going to be down the road, and we're going to start looking like the school board, and I don't want to do that. So, I think that we definitely, Dan, you said it. We got to roll up our sleeves and we're going to have to get to work, and we have to find a solution ASAP.
Right.
But I just don't, I don't think that tax raises are it, because I never see the solution solved, either this year or 5 years from now or even 10 years from now, by raising taxes.
I agree, because the amount that you're asking is nowhere near what is going to solve the problem. So, I don't see the point in taking that option if it's not going to solve the problem. So,
Well, you're correct in that the mill rate, the increase, which I threw out for discussion, would solve the issues related to debt service and park and recreation and the projects going
Right.
on there. It would not solve the other issues in our general fund, specifically pension related.
the major issue, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, we're
Well,
going to
there-
do 1 and 2, and that's
Yes, there
it
is a
this
motion
morning?
and a second on the floor.
Okay.
Unless short of further discussion from the board or the public, we're prepared to take the action.
Okay.
Are there any other comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the question, then all in favor?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. The motion carries. We will, so that we will have final budget up for adoption in December.
December 21st,
Correct,
yes.
and that'll be advertised, and will you be
Posted.
placing this up on the generator as well?
Not on the township website, it's too big for the
Right,
for the TV, but yes, on the
right.
website, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
So just 1 meeting in December then?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Unless you want to
Just want to hang out?
We love you guys.
Just hang out.
No, I'm just checking.
And I know Mr. McPhillips excused himself. He's very under the weather tonight, so.
He is.
He was a real trooper hanging into, because he wanted to stay and cast his vote for the budget, so.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to new business. Review Land Development 2017-8, preliminary and final, 900 York Road, Land Development. Mr. Savona?
Mr. Chairman, this is the time set for the board's consideration of application 2017-08, preliminary and final approval of the land development application for 900 York Road. The property is approximately 4.2 acres situated at 900 York Road, having frontage along both York Road and Norristown Road within the R1 zoning district. Existing improvements consist of a dwelling constructed approximately 1780, known as the Klein House, 2 barns, a swimming pool, and a driveway with access from York Road. Applicant is proposing to remove the barns and swimming pool, to subdivide the property into 7 lots utilizing single-family detached dwellings, which is permitted by right in the R1 district. The Klein House would be proposed to remain within proposed Lot 2. Additional site improvements would include a private road, stormwater management facilities. Vehicular access will be from Norristown Road, and the site is proposed to be served with both public water and public sewer. The applicant's here this evening, represented by Attorney Kurt Schaefer. Good evening, Mr. Schaefer.
Good evening, folks.
Are you prepared to summarize your proposal and to answer questions?
Yes, we are.
Please proceed.
Your solicitor has adequately described the site. We have a list of waivers. I have a waiver letter of November 6, 2017. That's probably going to be the bulk of the discussion because there are a number of waivers with respect to the site. If you'd prefer, I can go through them each individually, but if there are any particular ones that you just want to discuss, we can handle it
I think
that
maybe in
way.
the interest of time, the waiver requests and the plans have been reviewed both by the Township's Planning Commission, by the Township Engineer, the zoning officer. There has been a zoning hearing board decision in order on this. I'll ask Mr. Kennard if there are approximately, according to my count, maybe 20 waivers under the subdivision
Correct.
land development ordinance and the stormwater management ordinance. Many of them are technical in nature. Are there any in particular that your office does not support being granted as part of the application?
No, we support all the waivers that have been outlined and briefly discussed, but there were some conditions. There are so many waivers that tie together to what type of development they're doing. A private road, no curbs, sidewalks. It's we've been working on this property for quite a while and it got to a point where most of the waivers are kind of intertwined. So there are certain conditions that I believe there's a memo in the packet from Amanda to Mr. Schuster, and those conditions, if agreeable, would address any of our concerns on the waivers.
So maybe we can narrow this to the conditions, Mr. Schaefer? You can indicate to me, assuming that the board would be inclined to grant the 20 waivers that are requested, the township engineer and township staff are recommending that the applicant agree to the following conditions: that the applicant address adjacent resident stormwater concerns to the township, to the satisfaction of the township engineer. Is that agreeable?
Yes.
That the applicant would prohibit on-street parking where deemed necessary by the township fire marshal.
Yes, we've actually just resolved that late
I think I
today.
saw a late-breaking email on that.
And
which-
we are
o'clock
in
today.
agreement with the fire marshal as to how to restrict the parking
Very good.
without eliminating it.
That you would provide additional mill and overlay on Norristown Road where deemed necessary by the Township Public Works Director.
Yes.
Provide a trench drain near the proposed pipe run between head walls number 1 and number 2 to capture runoff from draining directly onto Norristown Road.
Yes.
Provide a no outlet sign where the private road intersects with Norristown Road.
I don't recall that. I don't necessarily oppose it, but that's fine.
Okay. Updating the traffic signal plan for Norristown and York roads to reflect the geometric changes along Norristown Road.
That's acceptable.
And executing an agreement in a form acceptable to my office to document the homeowners association's ownership and maintenance of the private road and other amenities that would be common owners elements.
Agreeable.
Very good.
I'll jump in, and related to that, just so everybody's on the same page, I know we're only talking a 7-lot subdivision now, and I know this has been discussed between the engineers and maybe even between yourself and Mr. Savona, but Lot 7 will have a proposed basin in an easement. Lot 1 is adjacent to a proposed basin, number 1. That's not part of that. That's a separate parcel that's going to be
Separate property maintained by the homeowner.
by the HOA. Okay,
Both
so,
basins will be maintained by the HOA.
That's correct.
but
yeah.
one's on lot 7 and one's not on the other lot. Okay, that's how you guys, it's fine. I just
Yes.
want to make that clear because
I'm assuming you're not, since you're not subdividing the smaller basin, that'll be subject to an easement and
Yes.
maintained in favor of the HOA or the developer and his successor.
Correct.
Okay,
that's fine.
okay. Obviously, there are other conditions which we normally impose, including the applicant would comply with the requirements or the comments of the township engineer, zoning officer, director of emergency management, and the conditions imposed by the zoning hearing board. No objection to those, I assume.
None.
And you would enter into appropriate development agreements, provide proof of any required highway occupancy or conservation district approvals to the township prior to the issuance of permits.
So agreed?
Very good. I think that covers my normal conditions.
I got, just might as well address this now. The conditions of the zoning hearing board, one, as far as the rehabilitation, refurbishing of the existing house, subject to architectural controls agreed to by the applicant and township consultant.
Correct.
I'd like to at least define who the township consultant is, so we don't have to discuss that later. And also, and we've all been through this before, is there gonna be escrow posted for all that? How long that, there's no guarantee to that other than that's part of the zoning hearing board decision. So in the past and other projects, that's been discussed, and I'd rather do that right now while we're all here, so we don't have to discuss it later. And I don't have a position on it, just I think those two issues should be resolved. They are conditions of the ZHB. If you can craft something in agreement that you're happy with, that's fine. I just would like to know who's going to sign off on that. Just typically that would land on my,
Fair question.
and I'm probably surprising everybody. I was just rereading that before the meeting and said, I'd rather not argue about that later.
Well, I think because what the board's asked is basically for a declaration, so that would be, we could either encapsulate that as a plan note or as a deed declaration.
Yeah, I think what the zoning board specifically was looking for was a covenant of restrictions that the Klein house would never be torn down or changed into something other than
Residential.
its architectural roots would dictate.
And then I think we could probably work out the township consultant, which I assume at some point would be an architect that we might retain. But we can work that out as part of the declaration language, I think.
Just as long as it's covered in there, that's fine. Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. Any questions from the board with respect to the plan or the application?
Just real quick, because I know this has been a long process. With its location being right there on Norristown and York Road, are there any traffic restrictions on this development? Any concerns because what I've heard a lot, and this question actually came from one of our audience members out there, is a lot of the concern was about ingress and egress because of where it's situated. Are we as a township comfortable? There's no particular restrictions on top of that, or?
For 7 lots, yes, I'm comfortable.
Okay.
For 70, no. For 25, no. But based on the density and the improvements that we worked out with Public Works, their engineer, it's far enough away.
What's the distance?
I knew someone was going to ask it. I don't have it.
Kristen, you know?
Yeah, do you have it all?
I'm glad that you brought that up, because, I mean, I've heard that a lot, but even if I didn't hear it, that was one of
While
my
she's
biggest
looking
concerns.
up, one thing is, if you heard me notice, there's 2 basins. The location, and actually this was worked out several years ago, that has never changed through whether the number of units, because it's pretty much the best location to try to address stormwater on both sides of the property. There's existing stormwater problems. I have the pictures here. I've seen them. This will help a little bit. We've worked some other things out that I think will help the adjacent properties. It won't solve flooding problems, but the one basin, if we move the road further away, then we can't capture the stormwater runoff from those couple of lots, and more water will go right to the existing residents. So we had to balance traffic and stormwater management, I think, and that was discussed years ago with other sketch plans.
It's my concern with that intersection, are people that are traveling south on York Road, they proceed to make the right turn. Currently, it is not a no turn on red, as far as I believe. I do not think there is one.
Yeah.
So when people are making that right turn and they get over onto the curbside, I mean, I live not that far from this location. People's heads are looking to the left to see if there's any opposing traffic making the left turn, also into Norristown. So if there's any kind of backed up traffic, if there's anyone trying to cut out of the driveway, things of that nature, that's where my concern is. My one recommendation, I don't know what the process would be for that, would be maybe to add a no turn on red to that intersection. I don't know if we can make that recommendation. Is that a state issue?
State issue.
It is state. Now, they have to amend the permit plan to show the improvements, and they've agreed to do that. They have to do it. If the board chooses, that would be something we'd have to ask the state of any additional restriction movements, and they have final say. You have no jurisdiction, but you can ask.
There's going to be, I'm not saying there are going to be severe car crashes there, but there's going to be some. I mean, you're never going to be able to eliminate that, but, I mean, I think you got to try to do what you can to prevent it. I just know it's going to happen.
I agree with Mr. Monroe. Do you think that's a reasonable request?
I think it's reasonable, but that's up to the applicant to agree to.
Okay.
I can't require it. They have to they have to go to PennDOT, they have to modify the signal plan, so as long as, should be minimal cost of just updating it, should be minimal effort on the engineer's end to do that, so I don't think you're asking anything substantial, and restriction is pretty easy, signage, and then the permit plan reflects that, but no matter what, PennDOT has to sign off on that, and I can only recommend what the board decides tonight, that
Okay.
that was where, they would approach PennDOT and ask for that on our behalf.
Okay.
Well, that would, I guess the only thing I'll say is that's my one big issue with this property, with the driveway, and that would satisfy my concerns.
You can't make it, you can't make it a requirement to restrict it, but, so that can't be written earlier, and they have to come back, because, if PennDOT says no, then they don't meet their conditions, so,
And that would significantly delay this project as well.
well, I wouldn't recommend you even making that a condition when you have
Okay.
no jurisdiction or control over it.
Okay.
No, it's something that I think we can work through as part of the submission of the HOP plan to PennDOT. PennDOT will ask us for comment, I assume.
We would ask PennDOT to look at that and then have their engineer evaluate it, or have a consultant evaluate that on their end.
I mean,
I would think that would be fair to investigate. If someone comes back and PennDOT says X, Y, and Z, and then it, to their defense, and the dollars go through the roof or something that I can't foresee, but I don't see it being a big issue. It's the issue whether they approve any change out to there.
do we have data to suggest that it wouldn't be an issue? I mean, has the traffic engineer commented on that?
No, that's us, and we have not, that did not come up.
Okay.
That is not something you would, I understand what you're saying, I use that a lot, so I would say we at least just investigate it and see where it goes.
Well, to try to put the matter to rest, let me tell you that the applicant will make the request of PennDOT
And we'll see.
and express
See
to
what
them
happens.
that this was a township concern, and
Sure.
we have no objection to it if PennDOT approves
Yeah.
it.
And we'll help facilitate
Thank you,
that
Kurt.
dialogue.
Thank you. We appreciate your initiative to help us out with that.
Any other questions?
If I may revisit a topic.
Sure.
With respect to the Klein House, you know Mr. Piotrowski's an architect. And what we want to make clear here tonight, and as will be refined in the declaration, he doesn't want anyone to be under the impression this is going to be a rehabilitation of the home, to restore it to its prior glory. It's a refurbishment, in keeping with the architectural constraints imposed by the zoning hearing board. But I didn't want anyone to come in there thinking that we're going to use, 18th century construction techniques and materials on that particular property.
The only thing I would, this is what I was going to say, and I didn't want to kind of open up that can of worms, but I do appreciate Mr. Piotrowski's efforts, and this has been, you've been extremely patient, and I appreciate that, and I think the entire board appreciates that. You went through the process. It's an often misunderstood process with planning and zoning and whatnot, and we're the final step with respect to some of these waivers and agreements. There's been another party that's come up quite often, has been present through the process, and that of course is a local Warminster Historical Society. And I know that we've spoken a little bit off on the side, if you would be open to working with them in the future with respect to either some sort of historical notification with the house.
I'll address that.
Thank you,
Please
sir.
come on up, Mr. Kutrowski.
The Historical Society was formed to stop the development of that house, of that property, okay? They've done everything they could possibly do to stop me, okay? We have letters, they went to the state, we have the state saying, there's no historical value in that house. I've agreed not to tear it down, okay? I made myself clear at the zoning board. I made myself clear when I came in for the sketch plan, when I first bought the property. I will renovate the house. I am not going to do a historical restoration of the house. No one, to my knowledge, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, has any kind of training or experience in the historic club to tell me the proper way to restore the house. I'm restoring a 1720s house in Ivyland, very similar construction, which is on the National Registry. This house is not. Ivyland Borough, they said, basically, is it going to look right from the street? And I said, absolutely. Thank you for saving the house. I am not going to consult with, and forgive me, this is going to sound sarcastic, with a bunch of amateurs on how to restore the house. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen.
Well, wait, stop. Mr. Petrowski, this is not our condition. This is a zoning hearing board condition, which is enforceable by law, that you are to consult with a township consultant.
Correct.
So we will address that in the appropriate order, and that consultant will, I'm sure, work with you to figure out what the appropriate manner is to renovate the house.
Well, I do want to.
Why don't we set the parameters this evening?
I gotta, let me just correct something. I wasn't suggesting that. That's not what my intent was, so I think you misunderstood what I was suggesting. When I said your patience, I understand the history that you've gone through. I do that. I mean, I understand, I respect you for everything that you've done. So that's what I meant by I appreciate your patience. What I was asking about is not about the conditions of which the house was going to be refurbished. I know nothing about that, so I would never make that kind of recommendation. I'm talking about with respect to a marker or a sign or something of that nature about the historical nature of the house, if there is any. And you pointed that out. There might be a disagreement with respect to that. I'm just saying, would you be open in the future to that? I'm not asking you to make any commitments or anything of that nature.
That's fine. If someone wants to put a marker there, by all means, that's fine.
In Doylestown, most of the houses have some sort of a plaque, usually by the door, that says, Smith House, 1720. Something like that, I think, is what you're
Right.
suggesting.
Right.
So a little placard, you can order them, they usually have house numbers on them, something, just Klein House, circa 1720. I think that would satisfy.
Very easy to do. I will,
Concern.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry for the misunderstanding.
No, okay, that's fine. I'm sorry if I come off strong, but.
I think it was the can of worms comment.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I mean, we might as well set the parameters for, I don't want any misunderstandings. I don't want, a consultant to come in and say,
Matt, I think no one here on this board is saying that they expect you to do a historical renovation or restoration of the house.
that's fine.
Quit while you're ahead.
Right.
Okay.
Matt, we are all on the same page.
We are.
You're teetering on the verge of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Right. We all agree that you have gone above and beyond to do the right thing, and we want to work with you, and all we're asking, to be able to support both parties. If we had a little placard like Mr. Savona suggested, and you still get your development, I think all parties should be happy with that.
That's fine. A placard will take care of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Well, I have nothing else.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
No, I haven't weighed in yet. I just want to thank Mr. Piotrowski as well. I mean, I understand where the history folks were going with the house, and that's certainly their right to go down that road, but I really appreciate Matt's patience. He's been up and down and over and sideways with this property, trying to develop it, which his right by law to develop, I might add. But I appreciate your patience, Matt. I appreciate your attempt to save the house, and the placard would be terrific.
I remember the first meeting we had about this, and I think, I mean, we've been through a lot, but I think the only thing the board asked at the time was save the house, and the house is going to be saved. I mean, and you kept your word, so thank you, sir.
It is a beautiful play, a beautiful home, and I'm sure when you refurbish the way you want to do it, I'm sure it'll look beautiful, and I think that's all the residents really will care about, you know, that because it is really unique in the township, so thank you. I want to thank you again.
Is there any other comments from the public before we take any action here? Sure, come on up, please. Tell us who you are.
Matthew Penji with the Warminster Historical Society. I just want to first put out there, you know, I respect what you do, you know, for what you've done for pretty much all of Warminster, you know, restoring homes in Warminster and doing all that. But to say that our group is basically just a bunch of amateurs is, I don't find that to be good or nice, you know. We're trying to do something.
Brian, I'm just going to ask you, direct your comments to the board. It's
Well,
not, it's not time to talk to Mr.
Okay.
Piotrowski. Matt, I'm sorry.
I'm just trying to get out there that, you know, we're residents that care about Warminster. We're residents that care about Warminster's history. We're residents that did not want to see, you know, 7 houses be put on the corner, especially on the corner that's going to have a lot of traffic issues, we feel like. To save the house, I'm fantastic to hear that. To work with us, to put on a plaque, I'm happy with that, but I just don't want to be called a bunch of amateurs. You know, we're a group that cares about Warminster. We're actually getting a community together to actually focus on Warminster's history. So I just find that to be important, and that's really about it. So thank you.
I can say when it comes to, and I think his comments were more pointed to construction and architectural. I'm an amateur when it comes to that. I mean, I'll be more than happy to say that. I'm less than an amateur. But I appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think, I mean, this has been a long process, and I can certainly understand Mr. Piotrowski's frustration. And I can also understand Mr. Penji's frustration at that. I mean, emotions get high. I think there's room in this town for everyone. And I think the Warminster Historical Society will have a role to play moving forward in our town. And I hope Mr. Piotrowski will continue working in our town and continue doing the work he does. And you know, I'm just, you know, some people didn't want the houses there. Some people did. I think at the end of the day, the preservation of the house, if in return we have 7 homes on that lot, then the price to pay for a lot of our history was wiped out years before we even got here. I mean, I drive through Ivyland and I see all those beautiful old homes, and I wish, you know, we could take Ivyland back and call it our historical. You know,
We have enough problems.
we have enough. Yeah, I know. I am not.
You invade Ivy Land.
Let's put a motion on the table right now. Let's get it out there. They're going through some changes where our board is strong and the same. We can take them. But what I really meant to say is that I appreciate the Historical Society. I appreciate what you're trying to do. I know that the outcome may not be the one you wanted, but please keep fighting for the outcomes that you want. And Mr. Piotrowski, thank you for your patience with us.
Save money overall.
With that, I'm going to ask Mr. Savona to craft a motion granting preliminary and final approval.
Very
for
well,
Slam
Mr. Chairman. If the board's inclined, a motion would be in order to approve application 2017-08 for the land development application relating to 900 York Road, subject to the applicant's compliance with the comments contained in the letter, the review letter of Gilmore and Associates dated October 17th, 2017, the zoning officer's letter dated October 17th, 2017, the letter of the Director of Emergency Management dated October 18th, 2017, the terms and conditions outlined in the zoning hearing board decision and order dated April 26th, 2017, subject to the grant of the waivers summarized in the October 13th, 2017 staff memorandum, which total of 20 waivers from the provisions of the subdivision and land development ordinance and stormwater management ordinance. Those waivers being granted subject to the following express conditions: that the applicant revise the plan to, or address adjacent resident stormwater concerns to the satisfaction of the township engineer, that the applicant install signs prohibiting on-street parking where deemed necessary by the township's fire marshal and in accordance with the email communications between the applicant's engineer and the township's fire marshal dated today, November 16th, 2017, that the applicant would provide additional mill and overlay on Norristown Road where deemed necessary by the township public works director, that the applicant would provide a trench drain near the proposed pipe run between head walls 1 and 2 to capture runoff from draining directly onto Norristown Road. The applicant provide a no outlet sign where the private road intersects with Norristown Road, that the applicant update the traffic signal plan for Norristown and York Roads to reflect the geometric changes along Norristown Road, and that the applicant execute an agreement in a form deemed acceptable to the township solicitor to document the homeowners association's ownership and maintenance of the private road and stormwater management features depicted in the plan. The applicant would also comply with the terms, conditions, and provisions of an approval and action letter to be issued by my office subsequent to the board's approval, including the execution of appropriate escrow agreements, stormwater management maintenance and monitoring agreements, and any other easements or restrictions as required by the township solicitor.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Ms. Frescatore, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Crowley, any further discussion from the board? Any
Thank you to both parties, Mr. Penji with the Historical Society and Matt. I think you've come to a nice agreement. Thank you both.
Any from the public? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Pietrowski. Thank you, Kurt. And thank you, Matt. Hey, item B, business privilege refund, Precision Dentistry. Mr. Savona, you might want to cover this one. This is a doozy.
Mr. Chairman, this is one that you don't see very often, but under Act 511, which is the statute which, the Local Tax Enabling Act, which enables the municipality to impose taxes other than real estate tax, we impose a business privilege tax. Under the terms of Act 511, we are required to entertain appeals from taxpayers relating to assessments or penalties that are imposed because of late payment, non-payment, or other audits that may be conducted of the business privilege taxes. This applicant, Precision Dentistry, filed an appeal requesting a refund of business privilege tax penalty and interest, I believe.
Correct, it was under $200.
And has failed to provide the required documentation to complete the application. Because these applications are required, or these appeals are required to be ruled on within 60 days under the Act, in order not to have a default approval, my office is recommending that the board deny the appeal of Precision Dentistry from their appeal from the business privilege tax assessment.
Hey, is there a motion to deny?
Motion.
Is there a second? Mr. Monroe, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Crowley, any discussion from the board?
No.
Any from the public? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Get your paperwork in.
Right.
I mean, I would love to give money back. Not this year.
Well,
but,
I would caution against that.
Hey. More for the Ivy Land campaign.
Just in general, we do get these from time to time. The vast majority, in talking with them, they withdraw the request. This one did not. There are very few, if any, reasons which we would ever recommend granting such a request.
Right.
In this case, the business had an individual who went out on medical leave and never saw the paperwork, didn't pay their taxes on time, and was asking to be relieved from the penalty. And in my opinion, that's just not an excuse. If that was to be granted, then you can imagine the number of people who would.
Well, there's a certain
have the
amount
same-
of responsibility that.
Well, in actuality, we're not allowed to waive penalty and interest unless because we have a uniformity of taxation requirement in the Commonwealth Constitution, the courts have held that in order to waive penalty or interest, the taxpayer actually has to prove either there's a breakdown in the system on the township's end,
Right.
or they relied on incorrect advice from someone on the governmental side. Otherwise, the failure to pay taxes is, when they're timely due, is not an excusable waiver. You can't waive penalty and interest for that.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Next up is item C, award defined contribution RFP. Mr. Schuster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A while ago, not too long ago, we did an RFP and awarded a new plan advisor for the defined benefit pension fund. That was PFM. We have subsequently gone out under the auspices of the Pension Investment Advisory Committee, issued a defined contribution RFP. We don't have a lot of employees in defined contribution plan right now. That is growing for all of the non-uniform employees, both union and non-union. As of a few years ago, we'll be going into, all the new employees will be going into this defined contribution plan, so it'll be growing over time. The RFP was issued. There were only 2 respondents. My guess is the reason why there was only 2 is simply because it's such a small plan right now. It's not very attractive, but again, it will grow over time. The 2 were Byrne Wealth Consulting and INR. Both were interviewed. The Pension Investment Advisory Committee is recommended the selection of INR. The 2 non-uniform union reps took that back to their respective unions to see if there was any issues. There were none, so it's presented to you tonight for your approval with the appropriate agreement.
Okay, is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second? Mr. Monroe, is there a second?
Second?
Give it to Kathy.
Ms. Frescatore, I just want to make a quick comment. I sat in on the interviews. We had two people come in and interview. They were both really good, but INR was really head and shoulders above the other, so the board, that's why the board recommended it. It was the right recommendation, so. With that, is there any further comment from the board? Is there any from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Was this the first time we had a decision since we put the reps on the board, the union reps?
Yes.
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 So it worked really well, worked as designed?
Yeah, they went back and admittedly, the unions don't have much of a vested interest because they
Right.
don't have a lot of employees in the defined contribution plan. But they went back, they asked if there was any issues, and there was none. So yes, it did work.
Good.
Yeah, so it should be good. All right, next up is the award mowing and turf RFP. There's Mr. Schuster again.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did go out to bid. The results have been tabulated with a recommendation that's been put together with a memo from Karen Whitney, who is here in case you have any questions. It would be split between 2 different vendors. It is a 3-year deal, which we are recommending approval for this evening.
Okay, is there a motion?
Motion?
Is there, Ms. Frescatore, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Crowley, any further discussion? Any from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Motion carries. Next up is item E, award snow removal services, RFP 2017-2019.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you recall, we rejected previous bids before. We had some issues with the bidding process, so we started over. We did get 2 bids in, 2 bidders with multiple bids. We are recommending selecting both. This is to be used at will, at our need, so we have multiple vehicles that are going to be available to us.
Okay. Is there a motion to award?
Motion.
Mr. Monroe, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Crowley, any further discussion on the matter? On the motion? No? Any from the public? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion carries. Item F, authorization to advertise ordinance to amend the rental housing inspection program and repeal the contract registration ordinance. And I think Mr. Savona and Ms. Zimmerman are both going to handle this.
So I'll kick it off, Mr. Chairman. The ordinance that's proposed by staff would amend Chapter 13, the licenses, permits, and general business regulations provision of the Warminster Code to adopt a new Part 9, which would impose new regulations relating to rental housing licenses that are issued by the township. Presently, those regulations are contained in Chapter 5, which is the property maintenance provision, which is not really the appropriate place for regulations of that nature. The ordinance would establish two things. One, it would reestablish residential rental license permits. Right now, the township licenses or proposes to license multiple dwellings, dwelling units, rooming houses, rooming units, motels, hotels, apartments, multifamily dwellings, condominiums, duplexes, and other types of units, which is much broader than the typical rental license provision. Usually we deal with rental licenses when you are talking about renting out residential units. So we would restructure the nature of the residential licenses and, importantly, provide for an inspection program for those residential units. And I'll let Amanda explain the structure of the inspection program. The inspection program is particularly important because there have been decisions by the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania this year out of the city of Allentown where the landlords in the city had challenged the rental license fees that were being charged by the city. The challenge was that they weren't in fact fees, which are designed to recapture your costs. They were, in other words, a tax, which is not permitted. You can't collect revenue generally by imposing fees. The argument was the city wasn't performing any service or any viable service in exchange for what they were charging, and therefore the fees were illegal. Commonwealth Court upheld the fees, but did so because the city had an inspection program. They didn't necessarily inspect all of the units every year, but there was a coherent program in place to provide for some service that the city was doing to service those units that would justify the imposition of a fee. Warminster has not been, in any point in the past, conducting a routine residential unit inspection program. So in order to correct that and to bring our rental licensing provisions in accord with current state law, we've restructured the program to be reflected in these regulations. Also, the second part of this ordinance would repeal the current contractor registration ordinance, which was adopted prior to the state licensing contractors at the state level through L&I. Contractors, home improvement contractors, are required to be licensed and to register with the Department of Labor and Industry, providing proof of insurance and things like that. That's available to residents through a database that they can look up before they make a contract to deal with somebody on a home repair. That is a statewide database. When that statute was adopted, the local registration and licensing requirements were prohibited. We hadn't adopted an update to our program since that time, so this would bring us into compliance with current state law. Amanda can talk about the inspection program that she's crafted, and if you have any other questions.
Basically, we're going to focus on the health, safety, and welfare of the rental units within the township. We do have a large number of rental units, both in apartments, triplexes, townhouses, and single-family homes. So by working with staff and Keystone Municipal Services, who does this in other towns, we are going to focus on ensuring health, safety, and welfare of the people that are renting from a landlord so that they're not living in somewhere that is less than perfect for them as far as major health safety and welfare concerns. So by looking at this and working with Keystone, it'll be for condos, apartment complexes, basically multi-dwelling facilities will be an annual inspection, and then residential, so single family or townhouses, triplex, will be on a biannual inspection scale. But everyone will be required to get a license every year, and the fees will be adjusted accordingly. So that way, the fees that we are charging are simply just recouping the costs that we're putting out to ensure the health, safety, and welfare for our residents.
Is there a component of, can a complaint or report of unsanitary living conditions trigger an inspection?
Yeah, nothing about the standard scheduled inspections would stop the township from enforcing generally the property maintenance code. So that can still be done at any time.
We've done that several times this year. We've sent in our building inspector and our fire inspector into different apartments because their tenants are complaining that it's unlivable. And so we've gone in and done inspections for them.
All right. So this doesn't preclude us from doing anything with that?
Nope.
Okay.
No. What it does do is just make sure at least once a year for the multi-units and at least every other year, the township's putting eyes in that as departments to make sure there's no issues, smoke detectors are functioning, things like that.
Does this have anything to do with safety? If there is a problem with a particular complex with safety issues with the police having to go there, on a regular basis? Perhaps they can patrol more? Does it have anything to do with a safety issue? No,
No,
just
it's not tied to the police
sanitary
department.
and making sure that the building is up to snuff and all that. Okay, thank you.
Anyone from the public have any want to weigh in on this before we take action? Sure, come on up, please.
Do you know how many rental properties there are in Warminster Township?
There are about 1,800 apartments, and I think another, that we know of for certain, another 300 to 500 non-apartments. So condos, single families, triplexes, duplexes.
18, that sounds low, I would think, with all the different
It
apartment
includes
complexes.
all the new apartment complexes was that number.
And so what revenue was generated, because I have a rental property and I had to pay my $100 every year, what revenue was generated last year by the $100 repeated fee?
For 2016, when we collected that, I believe it was around $220,000.
So when you guys come in to inspect, what points are you inspecting?
So we'll be looking at the similar items that we use for the resale housing. So smoke detectors, room space, just the normal, like the health, safety, and welfare. The intention is that we'll be putting packets together shortly to send out to all the rental properties that we're aware of, so that you know what we're looking for ahead of time. But everything is outlined under the International Property Maintenance Code.
Because when I started renting my property out, like I needed a chimney cert. Am I going to need a chimney cert
No.
every year?
No,
Okay.
you'll have, it's a basic list that you as a landlord will be able to go in and handle pretty much everything by yourself.
Now, so you're talking about hiring a third-party firm to do this?
We already have Keystone Municipal Services handling our inspections for building, fire, and zoning, so we'll be using the same people that we have on staff.
So they currently do that, and what do they charge per, at this point, when they do an inspection?
When we do, our building inspector is $65 an hour. He will not be the one doing the inspections. It'll be probably one of the zoning officers, who's around, I think, 60 or so, give or take an hour as well. But see, I think what you're talking about with the chimney inspections and things, that was part of that's the resales. So when
No,
you
we
buy,
had to do that when we rented the
When you
property.
rented it for the first
And you
time?
guys lost the chimney cert and sent me a nasty letter and then found it. So, I, having to redo it. I mean, and I don't even have a fireplace, it was the heater chimney. So you have a third-party company,
yes.
but you're not going to use them, you're going to use a township building inspector.
Our township building inspector is part of the third-party company.
Okay.
So everything down in
$65
L&I is
now.
handled by Keystone Municipal Services. They do all of the inspections.
Okay, so do we have to have something written into our lease that every 2 years, because I have a single-family home, that every 2 years, the tenant's going to have to take a day off to have the house inspected?
We're going to work with the landlords and the tenants to make sure that the inspections can happen at times that are as convenient.
After 5 o'clock at night?
I don't know if that's going to be
You
the
know what I mean? Because
possibility.
I'm going to have to take off of work. My tenant's going to have to take off of work. So
I
we're both, you know what I mean?
Right. I
for-
understand. This is something that we've had on the books for years as well, to be able to do these inspections, but we have not. But with issues that have come up over the last year of residents that are renting from places, I stepped back, and it was one of the things that I wanted to focus on, trying to clean up and making sure we improve the health, safety, and welfare for everyone in the township.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm thinking ahead of my question. So,
If it's any consolation in here,
Yes.
one of the things that you have the option of doing, and it's mostly to combat the absentee landlord type problem. One of the things that the rental licensing requires is that if you don't reside within 10 miles of the township, then you have to designate a resident agent. So when the township contacts you, that you have somebody that you want to designate to go there to open the unit up, or the township can communicate because you work and your tenant works, you have the option of doing that as well.
to hire somebody, so.
Well, if it's
Okay,
a
but
friend, or if
a-
it's somebody in your family
Right,
or
but if you have a
someone.
rental agent, they're not going to do that for free.
No. they're not.
Right, so, but do you get what I'm saying? That I'm going to have to take off of work. My tenant's going to have to take off of work. And to let someone that's a stranger to them, that's not a township employee, are these people, do they have background checks done on them?
Yes, they've all had background checks by Keystone Municipal Services.
By the Keystone, not by the Commonwealth, like child predator, fingerprints? I mean, I'm letting a stranger in my house. They're going to look in and see everything that
They
my
work for the
tenant owns.
township.
No,
They
work
have
for a
township
third party.
ID. They're contracted with us, and they're appointed officials. Our zoning officer right now is a township official.
But-
Whether he works for us or Keystone doesn't change the fact that he's a township official.
So he's vetted through you guys? That's what I'm
They
asking.
submit the background information to L&I as part of their contract, yeah.
I'm sorry, maybe I'm not getting on. So who does the background check? The company that's,
Yes,
so they check their own employees?
yes.
The certifications, as you probably know, can be ordered through the state police, and are the
Yes.
same ones that our township would do. So
So
they're
that's what they
standardized state
provided.
police background check forms, yes.
Okay, so well, that's.
It's not anything crazy or unique, Anita. It's
Well,
the
no.
same certification that every
Excuse me.
volunteer does.
Excuse me.
That every that
Excuse
state
me.
police does for everybody.
Excuse me. She said that the employer did the background check. You're saying that the Commonwealth
Provides
did
the
it.
information.
Okay.
Any employer who
But that's
is
not what she
required-
just said.
but-
She said that the
The
employer
employer
did
is
it.
Keystone Municipal Services.
I
And
get
they're the
it.
ones that.
They
Provided.
Correct.
They didn't
Yes.
do the background check. They provided a background check
Correct.
done by a qualified
Yes.
party.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
because that was not what she said.
If that's not what you understood or not what she said,
Well,
just so
I'm
we're
really
clear,
good with English.
Keystone provides the required clearances through, and they're done, Act 33, Act 34, child predator, all the things that we require.
hope so.
That are done through the state police.
Okay, because that was not made clear. All right, so but you don't know if you'll do them on weekends, you don't know if you'll do them at night?
We are aiming to try to do as much of them during the traditional business day as possible is the intent.
Okay. And it's going to be less than the $100? Because that's
We
what I
are
was.
reviewing the fees at this point. as
Because
well.
I was told it was going to be great, it was actually going to be less than we were paying now.
I'm not sure right now. We're still reviewing the fees to come up
What,
with
the
a
way
number.
it's calculated and the way that the township has to do it is once the program is set up, the numbers are all going to be driven by the budget, and they may change year over year. So whatever amount of time it's going to take, whatever the costs are going to be that are associated with that particular aspect of the inspection program will be divided up by the number of units that are to be inspected, and the fee will be derived by simple arithmetic. That's as basic as it gets, and
So
that's.
it's not an hourly rate, it's a part.
It's going to
by-
be done, if the inspector can do 4 inspections in an hour, then, or if he can only do 1 in an hour, it depends on what time it takes, what the actual costs are to the township. You go into an apartment building where there's 50 units, it's not going to take you 50 hours to inspect that building. It never does.
No.
So they come up with a figure that it's going to cost in order to do all of the inspections, and then that's basically prorated across all of the units when they divide up the fees.
Okay. I just don't, I understand you're being compliant with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but I don't think that you're taking into account the landlords in the township, their time, and the tenants. I don't think that you're thinking that through. I think it's incredibly onerous. It really is. I mean, I just can't even, I can't even tonight, you know. Thank you.
Is there any other comment from the public before we take action on this? Or the board?
I do have a question. And will this apply to like Ann's Choice or any kind of like medical assisted living, anything like that?
Those aren't rentals.
Okay, just making sure.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a motion, authorization to advertise ordinance to amend rental housing inspection program and repeal the contractor registration ordinance. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Mr. Monroe, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Crowley, any further discussion?
So this is the advertisement.
Yes.
It's not
Yeah,
approval.
motion
We
that-
have to vote again?
Correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay,
Let's
seeing
get
none,
it out there.
call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Item G, consider approval of Resolution 2017-39 prohibiting Class 4 casinos. Mr. Schuster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is not one I ever thought about bringing to you, but Act 42 was recently passed, which provides for 10 Class 4 casino, or Category 4 casinos, also called mini casinos, in the Commonwealth. A mini casino is one that is not less than 300 or more than 750 slot machines and table games. The reason why I'm recommending passing this resolution is the act gives each municipality the option of passing this resolution to prohibit any of these casinos from coming into your township. You only have until December 31st to take this action. If down the road you wish to entertain having one of these casinos, if someone approaches us and opens up a dialogue, you retain the right to rescind this resolution on a one-time basis. But in order to protect the interests of the township, I would recommend approving this resolution, and we would send it over to the
I'm
proper
sure Ms.
board.
Whitney would love to have one in the park.
Shenandoah Woods.
Casino at Shenandoah Woods.
That's how we win the lottery.
There's our nice host fees.
Act 42, wouldn't we be, now, granted, I just read up on this, and I'm not as educated on it as you. Isn't our proximity to parks likely to disqualify us from having, being eligible for one anyway?
Oh, it very well may. There's a lot of things that could disqualify us, or not even make us attractive to people who would want to put a casino in there. Nevertheless, I just want to preserve our right to prevent it.
Right, so the idea is that we're taking, we have a right that's available to us for 6 weeks, and you want
Correct.
to exercise that right, which can be undone in the future, should we need to.
Correct.
Because, and then the only reason I ask is when we talked a little bit about like the marijuana, medical marijuana ordinance, and how that we went ahead, we got that on the books quick. We may, down the road, may adjust it accordingly. This is a similar idea, get it on the books, and then to put the township in the best position and adjust it as needed.
Exactly. It's not, just minor change though, not adjust, it's either yes or no.
Well, yeah, I
In
mean,
this
yeah.
case, it's not like a zoning ordinance
Right.
where you'd be able to put restrictions on it. It's either yes or no.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm glad we're going ahead and protecting the township by voting on this, so, thank you.
All right, with that, is there a motion to consider approval of Resolution 2017-39?
Motion.
Pescator, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Monroe, any further discussion?
No.
Any from the public? Seeing none, I call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Item H, we are going to pull. We're going to revisit that Construction Board of Appeals at reorganization. So we're going to go ahead and pull item H. Okay, last but not least, item I, approval of the Christ Homes Pilot Agreement. Mr. Savona.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as I believe the board had the opportunity to discuss at your budget work session, the Christ Homes has had an appeal pending since 2015 in Bucks County Court involving a claimed exemption for its Shepherd's Crossing property in Warminster Township. The argument that Christ Homes has made is that the property qualifies as a continuing care retirement community and is eligible for exemption from the payment of any real estate taxes under Act 55, which is the Tax Exempt Organizations Act of the Commonwealth. We have, I went back and looked, we've been monitoring this case and reporting to the board for the last 2 years on the status. For a long time, there was no real activity. As of June of this year, the school district, which has taken the lead in fighting the exemption because they have the most money at stake. As of June, they began to trade expert reports. The school district retained an expert to try to disclaim the idea that they were operating on a not-for-profit basis. Christ Homes provided a counter report from their expert, and the parties agreed, and we entered a case management order to set the case for trial in November of this year. Both the township and the county, while my appearance has been entered and Mr. Williams on behalf of the county has entered his appearance, neither the county nor the township have been actively participating in the litigation where our appearance is entered, but because the county, the school district, and the township are all paying for these services by the same people. It's all tax money that pays for these attorneys. Traditionally, the school district will take the lead since they have the most at stake, but we monitor and take action as appropriate. As the matter was moving toward trial, Christ Homes agreed to settle the case by agreeing to enter into long-term pilot agreements, which are very similar to what we did with Ann's Choice in 2012 or 2013, I believe. The pilot agreement that's been proposed between the township and Christ Homes would be a 40-year agreement that would be valid so long as there is no change to the number of cottages on the property as of the date of the agreement. Any modification of the use or any change in the number would require additional consideration of their taxable status and a possible increase in the pilot payments. The schedule of reimbursement for the pilot payments would be as follows. For the first 2 years of the agreement, from January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2020, Christ Homes would pay 75% of the tax bill for that year. In 2021, they would pay 80% of the tax bill, and in 2022 and beyond, they would pay 85% of the tax bill for that year. There is an opener every 5 years to adjust the payments upward after 2023 in accordance with the Philadelphia Area Consumer Price Index. And what we did with Ann's Choice was we took an average of the 5 years prior and increased the payment once every 5 years by the CPI. In addition, and by the way, that's a similar structure to what the school district approved 2 days ago, the only difference being that their number is considerably lower than ours. They start at 60% and top out at 75%. In addition, Christ Homes has placed funds in escrow. They've made payments, tax payments under protest for the last 2 years, 2016 and 2017, which are the amounts that have been escrowed under the statute are equal to 25% of the tax bill. So for tax year 2016, they escrowed $9,369. Likewise for 2017, which is a total of $18,737.04. They have agreed as a part of this settlement to forfeit that money and to allow the township to keep those escrowed funds. The school district has a different refunding schedule. They're keeping part of that money, but refunding part of it to Christ Homes. In the event that the board's in agreement, I would ask you to approve the terms that are outlined in the November 15th letter that's included in your packet, and authorize the township manager to execute the final pilot agreement that are based on these terms. I would note, just as a little aside, as I said, we've been monitoring the case. My appearance has been entered in court, and we've endeavored to try to let the school district pull the laboring oar so as not to duplicate legal fees. I can tell you, I printed this off today, you will enter into this agreement if you're inclined, having spent only $77.50 on my services over the last 2 years.
Well,
So
that is quite a
I
bargain.
think it's a win for everybody.
Thank you very much for all your efforts, for the
You're
money
welcome.
we're getting back, and only charging us $77.
And
We're
50
very-
cents.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the Christ Home pilot agreement.
Motion.
Mr. Monroe, second.
Second.
Mr. Crowley, any discussion from the board? Discussion from the public? Please come up.
It's based on the current tax amount. So it's parcel 49-001-010. That's the parcel that was subject to the appeal. So the current tax bill for that parcel is approximately, it's around $37,000, give or take.
Or any further discussion from the public? None from the board? I'm going to call the question, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
When the chair votes aye. Motion carries, and thank you, Mr. Savone. I'm glad to put that one to bed. Next.
Ditto.
Next up is professionals report, township managers report. Mr. Schuster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You all have my written report in case you have any questions. Additionally, I'd like to say congratulations to Archbishop Wood on winning the Paint the Plow contest. They did a magnificent job on that. You can see pictures of it online, and I believe we'll have them here at the December meeting so they can get their accolades. I'd also like to pay special recognition to the Warminster Police Department. They've recently gone through their reaccreditation procedure. They came through with flying colors. This is done, is that every 4 years, Ron? 3 years. Every 3 years. 3 years that they have to go through this, and they just did an amazing job. It's a lot of records that they have to pull, a lot of work to show all the compliance that they've done with best practices, and so I just want to commend them and everything done. I especially want to note Detective Bonaquisti, who took the lead in getting that accomplished. So great job to everyone over at the PD. Speaking of police, just want to make sure in the season of giving, sometimes there are people out there with less than noble intentions. Just recently, we had a scam target the township where someone impersonating me tried to get the finance director to wire funds to another place.
Nigeria or?
Impersonating you?
Impersonating me, yes, but by email.
Oh,
you know.
okay.
And don't, this actually, another township did fall for a similar
Wow.
issue, and not too far from here. But my point is that these scammers are out there, they will try anything, and if they will target a municipality that has its own police department, they won't think twice about targeting anyone. So I just would urge everyone to be cognizant of the emails you're opening or phone calls you're receiving, and take everything with a grain of salt, and don't be afraid to be skeptical. Also, like to wish our library director, Peggy Lindner, a fond farewell. Peggy will be leaving us at the end of this month, although she will be helping us on occasion as we transition to a new library director that we're in active search for. She is moving out to California, so again, want to wish her well and thank her for everything that she has done for the township. She was a library director when it was an independent library, and she was through went through the transition when the township took over the library. So again, thank her for all of her efforts throughout the years. We will be on Monday issuing RFPs for professional services for the board to consider. We'll look forward to getting all those responses to you, and possibly setting up some time to have interviews in December. Other than that, happy Thanksgiving to all. That is my report.
Anyone have anything for Mr. Schuster? Other than another job well done, I know you've been working double time getting the budget together, and we appreciate it.
Been a group effort.
Great job to you and your staff. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Next up is Solicitor's Report, Mr. Savona.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I've gone through my report, and I think I've covered everything. So unless you have any questions, I'm not going to belabor the
I have
point.
none.
Yeah.
Anyone have anything for Mr. Savona?
I do not.
Great job.
Terrific. Engineers Report.
I just
Mr.
told
Kenner?
Amanda I was going to beat him tonight, so thank you, Mr. I guess I'm not.
Just say thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one comment. In the pipeline will be a conditional use application for a single-family buffer development at 1270 Mearns Road. That is not in my report. And I also think we touched on everything else, or at least as far as land development. I don't anticipate any other projects coming through a planning commission or the board over the next month or so. But that one conditional use plan should be scheduled for 12/12 PC meeting, and then you may see that at your 21st board meeting for a hearing.
That's Doucher's Farm.
Yes.
Doucher's
1270
Farm,
Burn
so
Road.
it goes to planning commission 12/12, and then
That's
12/21
what
here.
we do.
For conditional use,
Just conditional use only.
not land development.
No.
No, they'll be back in 2018.
So, just because I know we're gonna have questions, right now, by right, it's an R2, right?
Correct.
And it could fit about, what, 36? And the plan's gonna come in,
I believe 42.
42 lots, it's 19.28 acres.
okay.
There's
So-
a significant amount of open space proposed still. as
So
well.
are they using the same plan type we used over at the schools?
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
Very similar to Longstreth Elementary School's design.
All right, I appreciate it, thank you.
Anyone have anything for Mr. Kenner? No. Thank you, Mr. Kenner.
Welcome.
Next up is Township Manager announcement of upcoming agenda items. Once again, Mr. Schuster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unless there's an objection, we'll cancel the December 7th meeting.
No objection.
We will have a meeting on December 21st. However, there is a likelihood that there would be some special meeting if the board chooses to interview some or all of the professionals that answer the RFPs.
Yeah, we should make a note of that the interviews with professionals are open to the public. They're
If the board is
considered-
meeting to discuss, it would have to be at a public
Correct,
meeting.
okay.
I would also anticipate an end-of-year budget amendment. That's very typical at the end of the year. We go ahead and move things between line items to close out the year. Along with that, we would adopt the final budget and establish the mill rate based off the action that you took tonight. I've already mentioned the Doucher Farm conditional use, and also looking at a possible awarding cleaning and custodial RFP that's been out there. That's what I have on the agenda right now for the meeting on the 21st.
21st. Got it. Okay.
Jason, on the comprehensive plan subcommittee, didn't we change that, the date's supposed to be in January, isn't it?
I believe you are correct.
Okay.
Yes, it's canceled and rescheduled for January 15th.
All right, so we'll get that out there.
Okay,
Yep, we can fix that.
thank you.
Okay. Next up is the second round of public comment. Residents have another opportunity to comment on any items. Is there any other public comment tonight? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on to supervisor's comment. Ms. Frescatore.
I would like to say thank you to Peggy Linder from the library board. She has done a phenomenal job over the years. We're certainly going to miss her, but we wish her well in her future endeavors. I'd like to congratulate Mr. McKee on the win of it for Township Supervisor. Obviously, the residents feel that you're working together on both sides of the aisle has boded very well for our township, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
I also like to thank all of our staff. All of you have done a wonderful job tonight, and I appreciate everything that you've done. Craig, Amanda, Mr. Savona, Mr. Schuster, all of you need to be commended on doing a phenomenal job. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Monroe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, I hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving. The number one DUI night is not New Year's Eve. It's not St. Patty's Day. It's the day before Thanksgiving. So I just want everyone to be careful. Don't do it. Everyone will be out there looking for you if you decide to do that. So just don't do it, and just be careful to everyone else. Outside of that, just to reiterate what Ms. Frescatore said, I was going to say this earlier, but I wanted to save it for my comments. Congratulations, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
It really has been an honor working with you for the last 2 years. I said it back then. Kathy and I came into this, and most newly elected supervisors, it's a learning curve. And you go up to various classes that are offered by PSATs, a state organization for supervisors. When I went up there and I saw all the other people that were around us, they were starting from scratch, zero. And I felt like when I got in there, I was very well informed. And a lot of that has to do with not just you, but Mr. Crowley and the rest of the board. We have a good atmosphere, and you were a big part of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say thank you to Peggy. Peggy was the first department head I met when I started getting involved in the township. Was always very, very nice to me and to everybody she met, even when it was clear I didn't know what the heck I was talking about when it came to the library. Just took a lot of time to educate me. I appreciated that. I already congratulated the chair. I do want to recognize really quickly, I think hats off to Anna Peak. She ran a spirited campaign, and it takes a lot to put yourself out there in the public eye. I respect Anna, Anthony Yovine, Shelley Eilenberg. They all worked really hard. Came up just short in a real close year. So my hat's off to all of them. Congratulations to Judy Hoover. She's going to join the Board of Auditors in January. Judge Dan, back for another round.
Nobody mentioned Judge Dan tonight. I'll be getting a phone call.
I-
I'll be getting a
I
phone
brought it
call
up.
tomorrow morning.
Congratulations, Judge Finello. Congratulations to our longtime tax collector, Bobby Loftus, on a well-deserved win. And our school board. Our school board is extremely important to Warminster Township. Every community's number one draw typically is the schools. So having healthy and vibrant schools is key. And the people who are elected to that school board are charged with a great responsibility. So I just want to wish the Warminster contingent, Mary Alice Brancato, Anthony Dixon, Andrew Dixon, wow, sorry, Andrew. Andrew Dixon and Tara Pellegrino, the best of luck in their new terms. And just tip my hat to Dana Morgan, who I don't know very well, but she served with distinction for 2 years.
Very nice woman.
Very nice
Very.
woman. A big thank you to Mike Hartline, who put 8 years in on that board, did a lot of great work. And then I have to take a moment just to say thank you very much to Jane Schrader Lynch, who's retiring after a 40-plus year run in this township. She served in every capacity you can think of. supervisor, planning, zoning, school board director, probably crossing guard, I don't know. She's done it all. She's been, at times, my biggest cheerleader and my biggest critic, and I thank her for all of it. She's made me better. So, congratulations, Shane. Enjoy the semi-retirement, because I know she's not going to stop speaking out. So, and lastly, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Have a safe holiday, and we'll see you in December.
Okay, I'll start off with wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and to combat that drinking and driving the night before, and Brian, you're 100% correct. It's the biggest night. Just don't do it. Get a ride or get an Uber ride over to my house over on Revere Terrace. We have an open house every year on the night before Thanksgiving. Most of the people there are on foot. The others are an Uber ride. All are welcome, including my fellow board members. Please do stop in and have a happy Thanksgiving. And I want to thank you all again and the people of Warminster. You know, since I was elected to this board, I've prided myself on putting the people before the party, to the point where it actually cost me the endorsement of my party this year. But, you know, I pushed on and I was successful thanks to the people of Warminster. And I will vow that I will continue to put the people before the party. I work with both sides of the aisle. I pride myself on that. And I think those folks in Washington ought to take a lesson from it. You don't see us up here banging each other over the head at meetings, because we try to form consensuses. We talk amongst each other in between meetings. And I think that's the way the people want us to govern. I do. And I think that's why we've been successful as a board. So I thank you again, and with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
So moved.